Hello and welcome to another Chat and Learn, everyone, here with PowerToFly. Super excited to kick off Friday with another 1 hour that's going to fly by so quickly. You all are going to see. I say this every time. And I say that to say we really want you to maximize this time here that you're with us today. We know that a lot of things are going on in the world. So the fact that you're taking the time out to share time with us today, we want to hear your voice. We want you to write in the chat box, take your mute off. I've muted everyone upon entrance just to avoid any background noise, but I can't stress enough how much we want to hear from you. So feel free to turn your cameras on. We believe in visibility. Take yourselves off of mute if you've got something that you want to share. And then just a couple of more housekeeping rules so that we all feel comfortable and confident here to share on this next hour. If anyone has any sensitive information and they want to be kept anonymous, feel free to write to me privately and I will flag that to our guest speaker. And if you do come off of mute, you will be featured in our live recording. And the last thing I'll say is to follow us on socials, subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can keep up with all of the great chats that we've got coming up. And I see some familiar faces on here. Thank you for turning your cameras on. Hi, Devney. Hi, Amanda. Hi, everyone, for joining us. Great. So I'm going to pass the mic so that we can meet our guest speaker here. So Dami, tell us a little bit about yourself, how you came to know about PowerToFly, and what you're excited to share with us today.
Sure. Can you guys hear me okay? All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Dami. I know a couple people on the chat, so good to see some familiar faces and good to meet everyone else. I'm a product manager at Amazon. I actually just started a new role 2 weeks ago. I'm on the Fresh team, which is Fresh is our grocery org. Prior to that, I was in the drone delivery team and I was helping to build technology that enables us to deliver packages to customers via drone. Specifically, I was working on technology that helps us maintain the drones and keep them airworthy and safe to fly. I've done a lot of different things in my career. I started off in sales as a financial advisor selling, believe it or not, insurance, and then eventually investment products. I've worked in a local government, worked in consulting. I went back to business school. I worked in strategy and marketing analytics. And then my first job at Amazon actually was in finance. And so I've had to reinvent myself multiple times. And when PowerToFly reached out to me and they were looking for a speaker, I said, hey, this is something that I've had to do many times and had to go through that uncomfortable period of just not really knowing or not being sure and having to get up to speed really quickly. And I figured this was a place where I could help people share a few practical tips and have a dialogue, a conversation about what it's like to transition careers, job functions, cities, or roles.
Great. So I'm excited to roll into this next hour with you all. You all have submitted some great questions offline. We're calling from a pretty diverse place, a pretty diverse spectrum in the world right now. So we've got, I'm in Argentina, we've got Canada representing on the line. We've got some more folks in Argentina, Italy, the States, we've got Cleveland, we've got New York, awesome, San Francisco. Great. So if you're just joining, I see Phoenix, Hawaii, great. So if you're just joining the chat, feel free to write in the chat box where you're calling from. I'll give you all a shout out as well. And then as we go through this next hour, when you see your question come up on the screen, feel free to use the chat box or come off of mute if you want our guest speaker to dive in deeper. If this wasn't your question that you see and you have something that you want to add, I can't stress enough, we want to hear from you. You know the spiel if you've joined these chats before. So we believe in the power of visibility and we want to hear from you. So let's start with this first question here, Dami. Can you take us through the step-by-step process of how you pivoted? Why did you pivot into product management?
So I'll maybe speak a little bit tactically. As I said, I was already working in Prime Air, again, the drone delivery team, and I was on their finance team. I was one of the first finance people hired on to that particular program. And it was very early stage. The team was very much in an R&D mode. And so my role was fleshing out the business case. It kind of required me to know a little bit about everything, to work with the engineers to figure out what the cost of building the drone was, to work with the operations team or the budding operations team on what was practical, what we could deliver. And what I really missed was being a subject matter expert in one thing. And product management is exactly that, right? Product management, you know a lot about everything related to one thing as opposed to a lot about everything related to everything. And I kind of missed that ownership in finance. I was very much an influencer of decisions, right? The ultimate decision is owned by the business group or oftentimes by the product team. Although I will say at the stage that I was in when I joined that particular team, the product team was very small. It was one person. So it was an easy influencer job, but I fully anticipated that as the team matured and as the team grew, much of that was going to transition, much of that ownership and decision making capability was going to transition, rightfully so, into the business and into product. And I wanted to be a part of the person that not only informs the strategy, but actually ultimately executes and delivers it. And so that's why I decided to pivot. The pivot, I would say, was one of the easier ones. Because I was already working on that team and I had built a lot of relationships, I had a really good relationship with the director of product management. It was a very easy transition for me to, raise my hand and say, hey, this is something I think I can do. This is something that I believe I have some transferable skills in. And because I was already working with her, I had some credibility. Now, what I'll say is, I didn't automatically decide to stay on Primaire, right? When I was looking into product, I considered other opportunities, mostly within Amazon. And we can talk more about that later, but that's where I really sort of had to flex that process of transitioning, right? Um, the truth is not everyone's going to believe that you can transition, and that's okay. What's more important is demonstrating, helping whoever the new hiring manager is see what parts of your previous role um, are transferable in your new role, what skill sets you can actually bring, and showing how you've demonstrated that. But again, we can unpack that later.
I love that you are automatically kind of jumping into finding it within yourself to raise your hand, right? And not waiting for anyone else to say, hey, you're great at this, you should do this. So I find that often in these chats, it takes the courage to even have that awareness,
Right.
and then to share that with, a manager, let's say. So I'd love for you to unpack that whenever you want on any of these questions, because I know it's very tangible right now for folks now who are dealing with the same thing. So let's move on to the next question here. How did you communicate your experience and transferable skills during the job search and interview to gain the confidence of others? Exactly what we were speaking about, right? While I don't have specific experience in the area I'm looking to enter, I'm very eager to learn.
Mm. Okay, so there are a few things that I would say. The first thing is, and I got this advice really early on in my career, when you're switching, try to keep one thing constant. It's just a lot easier to be credible if there is something that you're already knowledgeable about. For example, if you want to switch from working in CPG to tech, but you're already in marketing or you're an accountant, maybe make that transition in accounting in the same function. Or if you want to switch functions, you want to do product management, and right now you are, in my case, you're in finance. Try to do it within the same company so that you can at least bring something to the table and shorten your learning curve, or do it within the same team, which is exactly what I did. So that's, I think, the first thing in building credibility is keep one thing constant. Um, Another thing that I would say you can do is, whatever the new place you're trying to go to, figure out how you can pull some of that into your current role. If you're in a situation where you can be honest about your manager, maybe you can actually let them know and say, hey, I really want to develop in this specific area. If there's, say you're in finance and you want to switch into marketing, I'd love to work on this particular project that allows me to get visibility on advertising or whatever it is. Figure out how you can leverage your time, i.e., continue to get paid. You're still working, right? But you're starting to build skill sets that are relevant in the new position that you're trying to get to. If you absolutely cannot do that, then do it in your spare time. Volunteer somewhere. Offer your services to some startup or, somewhere where you can start to really build an intuition. And I would say doing that allows you to start learning the language of where you're trying to transition to, so that you can talk the talk on your resume and in the interview. Um, I'm com- absolutely making these numbers up, but um, call it 50% of how we connect with people in an interview is because we're using similar language, right? And if you start to practice those things, um, it'll just make the conversation, it'll make you seem like an expert sooner than you really are an expert. Um, and then maybe another piece of advice I would say is take a class or a certification. Those are actual things that you can put on your resume or you can speak to that go beyond saying, I'm good at this, right? This is someone else's approval stamp, if you would, of your capability. But nothing beats experience for sure. And nothing beats being able to keep one thing constant when you're transitioning.
Great, thank you for that. So we've got Devney, who also agrees with you that volunteering is a great way to meet people and gain new experiences. So thank you for writing that in the chat box. Let's move on to this next question here. What is the biggest thing that hinders people who are trying to make a career switch?
This one's an interesting one. I can give you my opinion and tell you why I've been scared to make a transition before, but I would actually be curious to know if you guys have thought about transitioning. Why haven't you done it? What's hindered you from making transitions that you've wanted to make in your careers? I'd be curious to know that, because I think I'll share my opinion, but that's one data point. And if you're thinking about what hinders people, there's people on here, so we can whoever asked this question, you can probably learn a lot more from everyone on here than you can from me. For me, the thing that's held me back the most is fear of the unknown. I love feeling like an expert. I love um, feeling like I can add value to a conversation, add value um, to like my actual job. And every time you transition, you start over, right? And that learning curve where I'm all of a sudden no longer one of the smarter people in the room is humbling. And when I've thought about not transitioning, that's always been the biggest factor for me. But I'm
Well,
curious to see what people are saying.
yeah, I love that you prompted our live callers to add to the chat box. So let's go ahead and do that, everyone. Let us know where you are in your journey. Let us know what's holding you back. So we've got some folks writing already. So for Omri, it's timing. For Diana, fear of the unknown as well. I also wrote fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
Someone wrote me privately here. I feel I'm only qualified for my current field. So maybe some imposter syndrome fits into that a little bit. Go ahead and let us know what you all think. Amanda also agrees with Devney. Let's see, I can't remember if I asked this. If not, please ask. Great. How do you compete when there are tons of people applying who had the same role previously? I keep getting passed over due to lack of experience. Okay, Damya, I'd love for you to approach that question.
Okay, so I will share my opinion again. We can make this a conversation. If someone else has some good tips, please throw them in the chat so we can all learn from that. There are a few things that I would say help with the competition. Definitely credibility, definitely branding. And when I say credibility, I mean part of it, what I've found is there is true lack of experience. Oftentimes it's a framing of your experience. And so it's working with friends or coworkers or people that you know are good at writing, and asking them to help you frame your experience in a way that's tailored to the role that you're looking for. That's going to help your resume stand out in a crowd. Use your network. Like you said, there are often thousands of applicants for the same roles, and part of what makes a resume stand out is the fact that it was a recommendation. So find your second or your third level referrals on LinkedIn, reach out to them, introduce yourself, and ask them to put in an internal referral for you. Internal referrals are still black boxes, but they're smaller boxes than the black box that you apply to online. Um, if you have a good connection with whoever this person is, very likely they might be willing to. I know I've often done that. If I feel really strongly about a person that I've spoken to, and I think that they're a really good fit for Amazon or a really good fit for the role, I won't just put in an internal referral. I'll actually reach out to the hiring manager and the recruiter with a personal recommendation. That goes a long way in at least getting you the first conversation. And then the branding piece, I would say, um, at the end of the day, recruiters are on LinkedIn and they're scouring and they're trying to see who you are. Beef up your LinkedIn. I'll be the first to say that my LinkedIn is not as good as it could be, but beef it up, especially when you're in job search mode, so that you come up in those searches when recruiters are looking for people. So those are three things that I would say. Make your resume stand out. A lot of times, again, it's not just about the experience, it's how your experience is framed. So tailor it to the role you're looking for. Network, network, network. Ask for internal referrals, ask for recommendations, and let your LinkedIn look like you're looking for a role.
Thank you for that, Demi. I'd love for you to dive into timing. So we have a couple folks who are writing that one hurdle that they are approaching is timing. And so Patrice writes, would like to seriously take time to enrich before making the jump so that the learning curve isn't so steep.
Mm. Yeah, so here's the thing. There's a couple things with that. I think you do need to take the time to start working in your desired field to lower your learning curve, but you're still going to have to climb a learning curve no matter what. Even if what you're learning at that point is not so much a new field or a new function, even if it's just a new way of working, you're going to have to climb that learning curve at some point. And so there is a trap, the analysis paralysis trap, if you would, where you can keep thinking about a thing and keep adding wins onto your belt or keep learning and never actually take the step. Switching or transitioning is always it's a faith step. You don't know you're not going to fail. And actually you might fail. And that's okay. Because what's the worst case, right? You pivot again. So there's no perfect timing. Now, there are some times that I think are worth um, reconsidering if you're up for a promotion, for example, or if there's something big happening in your current role. That might not be the best time to pivot. You might be better off waiting, getting your new title, getting your new bonus, whatever it is, and then pivoting. But outside of those near-term step ups, I would say there is no perfect time to move.
Great. And I'd love to also hear you speak a little bit more about networking. So we have some folks here writing about networking. Patrice writes, networking is so important. You can have all the skills and still be passed over because you're still a part of the crowd. And then we've got some folks writing about how networking is a little bit difficult for them. So I'd love to hear any tips or tricks, especially now during COVID and, things are moving online. How do you network authentically? How do you network to build your community to support what you are trying to do?
Yeah. So I think the best time to network is when you don't need the network. Before you need stuff from people is the best time to just reach out to them and have a bunch of informational interviews. And so I'm constantly in a low grade mode of networking, which is if I see someone pop up on my LinkedIn or pop up on my Instagram or on some other channel that I has done something that I find impressive, is working in a function I find impressive, I'll just reach out to them and ask for 20 minutes of their time. Pre-COVID, that was a quick 20-minute coffee I buy, we talk. Coffee's, it's not a huge commitment, but since COVID, that's a quick phone call. And I've actually found that it's easier to connect with people now because almost everyone has some type of work from home setup. Um, and it's low-lived because they don't have to do anything. They just answer their phones. But what I would say with networking is to make it organic. I just reach out to people randomly and have good conversations, and I stay in touch with them. Um, Now, when it gets to the point where I need something, I do try to first reach out to people that I already know, because a personal introduction is much better than a cold call. Um, then the next step to that is the first level of referrals, right? So if I have a friend of a friend, I'll reach out to my friend and ask for an introduction to the other person, let them introduce me via email. So it's a warm introduction as opposed to me just reaching out to their friend randomly. And I've seen people do that. I've had people reach out to me and say, hi, just Amri, we have a friend in common, Amri, or whatever it is. And I, because I'm open to networking, will typically, at least 85% of the time, respond favorably and have a conversation. But it's always a lot better, I found, when I get an email introduction from a friend. Then I would also say networking, meeting people through things that you already like to do, best way, because then it's not so there's just a lot less pressure. Whatever it is that you do outside of work, whether that's volunteering, whether that's, for me it's singing, whatever those things that like take up your time, meeting people there and just genuinely caring about what they do, who they are, where they're from, why they are where they are, and where they're going, that is another way to build community, build a network. And the last thing I'll say about this is try to remember. So when I store people's names in my phones, I'll write a note about them, so that helps me with keeping the connection the next time. I'm not starting from fresh. I have a terrible memory and I just never remember things about people unless I actually write it down. It also allows me to make connections, right? If I know, for example, Amanda's interested in this thing, I know Nikki's done it before, I can connect them. And when you start adding value to people's lives and start helping them build relationships, all of a sudden you're a more valuable relationship for them. And there's that like reciprocity. When you need something, you need a leg up, they remember that you helped them previously.
That's a great point. And so something that I love to do during these chats is to start putting things into practice. So I would love for folks to, if you feel called to do so, drop in the chat box your preferred way of connecting, whether that's LinkedIn or your website or an email or something like that. I think Nicole might be available to drop in a doc right now so we can all add there. If not, let's just add it in the chat box. And then I encourage everyone to reach out to each other. Maybe, one or two people who are on this call who are maybe, either on the same journey, or maybe they've already moved a little bit ahead of you, or maybe they're one step behind. And then we can all start to support each other online as well. So if you feel called to do so, of course, no pressure. Feel free to write your LinkedIn or your preferred way of connecting. And then we can start putting some of these things that Dami is talking about into practice now. All right. So until then, let's move on to our next question here. Dami, how do I tailor my resume to a different career field when I have limited experience in this space?
This one I would say is sort of similar to a question that we talked about before, which is just find ways to organically build some of that experience. You can't speak to something you haven't done. That aside, again, once you start to, whatever it is, whether it's a project, whether you're volunteering on it, what I would say is you need to know what people in the space you're looking for, you need to know what they care about. What is important, for example, to someone who's in finance? Speaking generically, if you're in finance, it's probably a good idea for you to be able to think strategically. It's probably a good idea for you to be able to read a P&L, to know something about financial reporting, right? If you're in product management, being able to demonstrate that you know how to think from a customer perspective, write requirements. If it's a technical product management role, that you know how to deliver results and how to get buy-in for a particular project or product. So those are things that are important. Now, once you know what people in that field or in that space are looking for, think really hard about what you've done that speaks to some of that. The truth is, unless there's a hard requirement, for example, you can't do this unless you're a CPA, or you need a computer science background to be able to do XYZ, which even that questionable. Unless there's a really hard requirement, most of our jobs have things in common. There's typically something that you can leverage, but you have to get beyond the static job description for the field you're going to, and instead peel back into the nuanced, what are they truly doing on a day to day, and think about your day to day and start tying those things together. So speak about your accomplishments, not just your daily tasks, and try to tie those accomplishments with accomplishments that would be that make sense in the field you're going to. I don't know if that was tactical enough, or if you maybe need additional help there.
I think that's great for me. If this person who wrote the question wants Dami to dive in deeper, feel free to write in the chat, or you can come off of mute. And actually, this is a great time to allow for a little light pause to see if someone wants to come off of mute and engage in dialogue with us with their voice. So I'll take a sip of water and leave a space for someone to be courageous enough to take themselves off of mute. Sometimes it works. Let's see if it works today. No, but I see more people drinking water, and that's good too. All right. So until someone feels like jumping off, we'll move on to this next question here. So how do you communicate soft skills in a resume without simply listing them?
That's a good one. It's the show, don't tell. Show me what you've done, don't tell it to me. That would be my biggest feedback there. I would say you can, if you are in a job where some of that happens naturally, then you can speak to that. You can talk about um, things that you've done to collaborate cross-functionally. You can write some of those using language that speaks to the fact that you have a, a decent or high level EQ. um, or you can have a separate section. So I think on my resume, I have like a other section. I've also seen other people have interests or what else sections in their resumes where you can bring in some of those more creative things that you do outside of work. And I think those are opportunities for you to demonstrate your soft skills. The biggest opportunity to demonstrate your soft skills, unarguably, though, is in the interview. It's in how you speak, how you connect, how you communicate. But until you get there, until you have that opportunity in an interview setting, I would say having one bullet point or a couple bullet points that speak to collaboration, teamwork, cross-functional work. If you're in sales, that's always a good plug to put there. If you've had to sell something before, it's pretty clear that you've had to at least use some soft skills, or having a separate section that allows you to demonstrate some of those other things um, in your resume. I would say outside of maybe even interviewing, just to pitch some more LinkedIn here, if you know the recruiter for the role, reach out to them on LinkedIn. They won't always respond, but every now and then, um, that additional touch point communicates something about, one, your interest in the role, but also um, it could be another opportunity for you to demonstrate soft skills.
So Dami, something that just brought music to my ears, because I love speaking about emotional intelligence, and I love that you are highlighting that when you're listing your soft skills, like on a resume or maybe in a cover letter, and especially in an interview. Can you dive a little deeper into the importance of emotional intelligence in the workplace, and how to show that you are self-aware, for example, how you can show empathy, and how that will add value to the work that you do?
Hmm. Um, so the way that I think about emotional intelligence is it's the it's the extra layer that takes you from being good at your job to being great at your job, right? Baseline, very likely everyone who's in that role can run the numbers, can, well, mostly can can do the job, right? But the things I think that allow you to stand out, it's exactly what you said, Mariella. It's having empathy. It's for me, ways that you can demonstrate um, emotional intelligence at work, being truly curious about your coworkers' lives, um, offering help, um, having one-on-ones with people, not just in your small team, but in your bigger sphere of influence, and essentially like blasting that out, right? Listening in meetings. A lot of times people are just listening to respond, or you want your voice heard so that you're not a wallflower and people say, okay, she's taking up space at the table or he's taking up space in the meeting. But what you're saying isn't actually adding value to the conversation. Um, I think showing high emotional intelligence is truly listening to what topic is being discussed, and then thinking about your response and letting your response actually truly add value. Another thing that I like to do is pay attention to who's in the room. I think one way to demonstrate emotional intelligence is tailoring your conversation to who's in the room, how they like to engage and how they like to speak. And then I think really importantly, who's not speaking and who's not included in the conversation. Um, and pulling those people in. Those are different ways that I've seen people demonstrate that they have a high EQ. As we get further and further in our careers, that becomes a lot more important, right? Because we get to a point where a lot of the individual contributor tasks are being delegated to people that report to us, or teams that we can outsource that to either other teams or other consultants. And the value that we bring is in making sure that every voice at the table gets heard, so that we have a diverse um, discussion and we're thinking really critically about issues that come up. And so I think practicing pulling people into conversations now as we're growing in our careers just ultimately is super helpful in the future.
And I love that you're highlighting this as being something that will propel your work and show how great you are at the work that you do. Because I know that emotional intelligence sounds scary to some people, because it's like, I don't know what to do with my emotions. Don't bring check, the old adage of check your emotions at the door and don't bring it to work. But it's the complete opposite. It's knowing how to balance your emotional intelligence and bring that into the work that you do, so that you can create products that essentially are considerate of not just people like you, but everyone. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that, Dami.
Yeah. I never, ever, ever check my emotions at the door, just as a matter of like, because I figure really what's the worst case? I'm gonna fly off the handle, or say something and I regret, and then I'm just gonna go apologize. I will always be professional, and I will always be respectful, but I try really hard to say what I say, to say what I mean, and communicate my thoughts, my opinions, and then particularly my feelings at work. So I've definitely been known to pull a coworker aside and give feedback, or to ask for feedback myself.
So this is just a personal question. Do you find that something that sets people off to want to make a career pivot is because there's a lack of emotional intelligence being practiced in the workplace, that maybe creates overwhelm, or maybe it creates burnout and things like that? Do you think that there's more opportunity for companies to incorporate emotional intelligence practices?
Yeah, I think 100%. There's definitely, um, and it goes back to what you said about the whole like check your emotions at the door. I don't think we all want to interact with people that have a high EQ, but somehow we don't want to practice it, which is really odd. And we don't want to talk about how we feel about a particular issue, and we want to talk about data and facts, except data and facts are incomplete. unless you're actually thinking about how they matter holistically. To your ultimate point, though, so I do think that the workplace and many employers can do more to get us practicing being complete with our data, because our feelings are part of data. There's just not hard data. I do think that employers could do more to create a culture where people feel more open and are able to be more honest about what they're thinking, what they're doing, what they're feeling. But I'm not convinced that that's a primary reason why people choose to pivot. My instinct, and again, this is one person's opinion, is that people pivot because they want to do something fundamentally different. They want to try something new. They are looking to make more money. They are tired of the lifestyle, perhaps, in a field that they're in, and they think that a different field will offer them a different lifestyle, or it will stretch them in a particular way. I think when people are feeling burned out or people hate their jobs, they just change jobs. They don't necessarily pivot fields.
Good
But that's
point.
just
Good
my
point.
instinct.
Yes, good point. And I'd love to hear folks on the line too, what your opinions are about career pivoting, specifically as it relates to emotional intelligence. We've got some folks writing in the chat box here, so I'm just going to flag this quick question. When your role is mostly soft skills, how do you identify accomplishments on your resume?
Jackie, I'd like for you to maybe talk a little bit more about that, because there are a lot of I think that'll help me maybe target my answer. When I think about roles that are mostly soft skills, I think about sales roles, and I'm not really sure if that's what you're talking about. So if you are open to expanding a little bit more on your question, please do, or you can, come on, unmute, off mute, and explain. But I'll start answering, assuming that you're talking about something like a sales role. And even in roles like that I think are more soft skill oriented, there are ways to show your accomplishments. One way is to maybe put your funnel out there. For example, I reached out to 100 people. Um, I increased new clients from 3 to 5 in the last 10 months. The only way to do that is by adding value to a particular client and having multiple conversations. And so that kind of starts to show that you're good at your job in that way. Let's see, if it's also mostly soft skills, you can probably speak to, I think, accomplishments such as building a new team, starting for example, like a mentorship program at your job, or having, let's say, holding panels and things like that. Like, if you can speak about specific things that you've led or experiences that you have owned, those are accomplishments that speak more to the soft skills. If it's sales, showing us the numbers always helps. Exposing your pipeline always helps.
Yeah, so I basically work in childcare. So I teach infant through 5-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
And I work with the parents, and I help develop children's emotional awareness and help mediate their problems. And I basically, it's that foundation of socialization
Right.
that's being built upon.
Right. So Jackie, there are a couple of things that you said here that as you're saying that to me, I wonder if you have interaction with the parents. If one metric might be, how to say the word metric, but if your program, your school, or I don't know exactly what you would call it, but if that's grown over time, that's one way to show an accomplishment that's definitely very soft skill based. If you can speak to, for example, the number of kids that had maybe were a little bit more shy in the beginning, and you can have like anecdotal evidence of this particular, like, this is how many people would play during XYZ time versus now. 10 of them are playing. If you could send surveys to the parents and ask like maybe specific questions about behavior changes they've noticed in their kids, and
Okay.
collate the results of those surveys, and that becomes an accomplishment that you can talk about. Those are just some things that came to mind as you were speaking, but there's always a way to demonstrate that, um, to demonstrate those soft skills for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much, Jackie, for hopping off mute. I appreciate that. And thank you for your response, Dami. All right. So let's move on to this next question. And we've got just a little over 15 minutes left, just to let folks on the call know, if you haven't had a chance to come off mute or write in the chat box, now's your time to shine. And until then, let's move on to this next question here. So how do you build credibility with an entrepreneurial creative career history pivoting into a corporate role?
Okay, so I'm not an expert here. If we have a bunch of entrepreneurs on the call, please share your experience. Um, I will say my twin sister is an entrepreneur, and she's run her business and also worked in corporate. Um, and things that she herself has done um, is to ask for recommendations, right? When you're an entrepreneur, the thing that can be hard with pivoting into a corporate role is you're the person recommending yourself. And so if I was Microsoft or if I was Amazon, what's my reason to believe that you are being objective about your own performance? And when you talk about your accomplishments, there's no way for me to vet that. I can't call your manager to say, how did she really do? I can't go look it up anywhere, right? So the only evidence is evidence that you make up. I think as an entrepreneur, the more you can get like your customer, the more you can sort of involve your customer input in there. If you've created a product, or if you've created a service that people have used, showing data around your increased sales or your interaction with customers, that's going to be super helpful. Having recommendations from customers also really helps. That those are a couple of things I can think about. I don't know if anyone has good ideas on pivoting to a corporate role from being an entrepreneur.
I mean, one thing just to piggyback on what you're saying is, I'm sure for whoever asked this question, I mean, I'm sure you've got a portfolio to share that can speak to your accomplishments. So I would just, try to beef up that portfolio so that you can show your wins essentially, and maybe get some feedback. Like Dami was saying, get a survey people you've worked with before for more clients, or, team members. Because I imagine that would be hard to career pivot from being an entrepreneur to corporate. But thank you for such a solid answer. And it's great to know you have a twin sister who is doing that as well, so you can speak to that. So I have a comment here from Nena. My teacher burnout has really taken a toll. My career change search has been equally trying, especially during COVID. The competition pool is so large. I'd love for you to speak on that, Dami, if you can give any tips or tricks or advice for Nena to get through these hard times right now.
Yeah, that one's a little bit of a harder one for sure. COVID has changed the game for a lot of people. I think it really depends on what you want to do, Nena. If you're looking to switch, like if you're trying to switch functions and do something different, then reskilling might be an option. If you have because there's a cost to reskilling, right? If you either have to do this outside of your time at work, which is it's a time drain, or you take time out of work, in which case you no longer have your income. So if you're in a position where you can pay the cost of reskilling, then this might actually be a great time to do that. We don't talk about it enough, but therapy, for real. It's hard to recruit. Recruiting can feel like a full-time job. And so having someone to talk to and offload and, kind of download on, that helps. I've also found that having a group of people that are going through the same thing has also helped me in general when I've when I was recruiting, having mentors in the field that I was going to helped me in framing. The networking is super helpful as well. Reach out to people that are in the field that you're trying to go to and just start coffee chatting with them. You can make it a goal, 2 coffee chats a week, 20 minutes each call, um, and start doing some of that organically. But yeah, I hear you on COVID creating a situation. It's just so unprecedented, and a lot of people are feeling very stressed. Many people are out of jobs. The competition pool is huge, and it's but reskilling, networking, talking to someone, those are all things I think that ultimately will help. And the truth is, sometimes it's once you're doing all those things, it's just a matter of time, right? You throw enough darts, one of them will stick. And once you're in, then you can pivot again and figure out how to make the next right step. Another, one thing that I found is sometimes we have a goal in mind, and it's not always sort of a straight shot, right? Sometimes you got to make a bunch of these sideways leaps, and that's okay too.
Yeah, thinking in a less linear way and more of a holistic way, right? So navigating these uncertain waters with a very heavy competition pool, it seems out counterintuitive to continue with this linear thought that was before COVID, let's say, or in a previous role. It's like breaking loose from that and experimenting a little bit, because I agree with you that now, the competition pool is so large. So the big question is, how do you stand out in the crowd? How do you become the big fish? And I see some folks nodding. I would love to hear, what you all are currently experiencing, or if you have some tips or tricks that have worked for you. I love that you said, Dami, I love that you said maybe, try to have a marker of like 2 coffee chats a week, 20 minutes per chat. And just to kind of, speaking about it, I find is helpful as well. So I know that folks who are joining these calls and are, connecting with folks offline, at least it's not all in your mind, and you're literally energetically getting some of those thoughts and frustrations out to like-minded folks who might be going through the same thing, or might keep you in the front of their mind when something does come up. So I love that, Dami, that you're saying to use your network in this case and continue to build them, so that in the future, when we do really need this to happen, we've been constantly building up this network, previously, to where, it becomes more leverage for us to use. So thank you for that. All right, so we've got another question here from Omri. Do you have any suggestions in demonstrating work examples that can showcase your transferable skills beyond resume?
I'm sorry, I was responding to someone else. Do you have any suggestions in demonstrating that can showcase? Well, it depends on what transferable skills you're thinking about, right? So outside of your resume, other people have used portfolios. If you're a designer, you can put together decks, presentation decks that showcase work that you've done. I've seen people use podcasts, basically any medium that you can use to deliver information, I would consider an option. Now, the thing to think about though is depending on the role, you might not actually until you're in the door. So your resume and your cover letter, mostly your resume these days, might still be the first point of interaction. But once you've been filtered through, and you have contact with a recruiter, you have an opportunity to start to present some of these other aspects of yourself. I think video is perfectly acceptable. Podcasts, PowerPoint presentations, documents that you've written that you've got really good feedback on, or that were impressive, attaching those. I think I would see those as all perfectly models. People have sent me Excel decks or models Excel models that they've built before, that allows me to see how they think and helps me like get a picture of how skilled they are. Those are all options for showing your transferable skills.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Okay, so we've got about 9 minutes left. I'll hold for another light pause to see if someone wants to hop off of mute and ask Dami a question with their voice here.
Hi, this is Kushi. I
Go for
have a
it, Kushi.
Hi.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So, Dami, I'm a mom who wants to get back to work. And while I have a lot of transferable skills, but they are not quantitative in nature because I have a huge gap on my resume. Yeah, but I have done valuable work. I have gained valuable experience in that break time. I have traveled the world. I have lived in different countries. I have uprooted my kids from one place and, bring them up in another place every 3 years, learned a new language, spend time and made new friends in different culture, learn new sports. So I don't know how to tie all that up and kind of in a way that add value to a sales career that I want to advance to.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that we you and I can probably talk offline too. Um, that's definitely a lot nuanced. I would say it depends on what type of sales, right? At the end of the day, it's a question of like, what are you selling, right? If you're selling something that's technical, um, it's good that all of these experiences will show that you're able to learn something new, drive something to action. You can be thoughtful. Um, but you'll still need to be able to demonstrate that you know something about, let's say, cloud technology,
Yeah.
which much of that knowledge can be acquired from home pretty easily.
Right. So
Um,
certifications help.
yeah, I would say certifications help for sure.
Okay.
And just learning something about the industry for sure helps. Understanding what their biggest problems are and reading a lot of articles, that also helps because then you can speak to it.
Right.
And I think I'm speaking with some bias because this is how I would think. But I feel that especially in tech, maybe a little bit less so in some of the older, more established industries, we're getting to a point where we're thinking differently about what a gap on your resume means. I have coworkers who took 2 year sabbaticals and they come back and bringing that experience, it only adds value and it helps us think better about the products that we're building, right? And so um, people take 5 years off and raise their kids and come back into the workforce. And I would say I do think that the tech industry on average is a lot more open to
Mhm.
that. Consulting also is an industry that tends to be more open to people with very varied backgrounds, and maybe sales too. But I do think that the environment today for mothers coming back to work looks different than it did 10 years ago, which is good.
Yeah. Happy to
Yeah,
be in that space. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank
But we
you.
can talk more about that.
Yeah, sure. I would love to. Thank you very much, Tammy.
Mhm.
Awesome. And Kushi, it looks like you're getting some support here in the chat box as well. Patrice writes, I think it would be important to showcase your ability to relate to different cultures since you've had the opportunity to experience them means a lot. And to Dami's point about emotional intelligence, I mean, that's definitely a soft skill to show, and how you've been able to successfully use your emotional intelligence while moving a whole family and taking a break and all these things. Dami, I definitely agree with you as far as the technology world being more lenient. We definitely have a long way to go still, but yeah, definitely different from, 2 generations ago, let's say, or even the previous generation, with being with being less biased based on people taking breaks from their career. So if anyone else has any good points to share with Kushi, please feel free to drop it in the chat box. And we've got about 5 more minutes left. So I'd love for you to tackle this question, Dummy, and then leave us with some food for thought. Let us know how we can connect with you offline. And then we'll be done with this chat. I told you that time would fly. So how do I leverage my existing skills to bypass the entry-level positions in a new field I'm pursuing?
This one was kind of interesting because I feel two ways about this, and I will be the first. I'm definitely biased on this one. If your existing skills mean that you have essentially accomplished whatever the entry level positions are, then the way that you bypass that is by communicating that effectively. It's by framing them correctly on your resume and by speaking to those experiences in an interview. Now, if your existing skills don't meet the bar for the next level, then you will have to start at the entry level. And maybe that's okay. One, maybe, one of the less glamorous parts about pivoting, but it's just true, is that sometimes to move sideways, you actually take a step back. You reset in a new field. You were on a promo track in this particular function and you switch to a new function. Now you got to start over. You're a year behind in that new function. And sometimes it's just you can't skip steps. But I try to remind myself that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And if I'm happier in the new function or in the new role, or I'm learning a new skill, then maybe it's okay that I'm back in quote unquote an entry level position. Maybe one concrete example of that is there are product managers at Amazon who've decided that they want to switch into software development roles and have, for all intents and purposes, dropped 2 levels, which is a big deal at Amazon, to be on a different path. And I think it's important to think about those trade-offs, but be realistic about the fact that sometimes you will have to take a step back.
Again, speaking holistically and not in a linear, old-fashioned way. I say old-fashioned just because, cyclical growth is healthy as well. And so sometimes you might have to, I love that you're saying you might have to step back in order to see things from a different perspective and really fulfill your desires and your passion with why you truly wanted to have a career pivot. We often think of, okay, this is the next step. And if I don't make it here, I've failed, or I'm letting myself down, or I'm letting my family down. And so just to take that pressure off of ourselves and say, what do I really want? And leave status out of it and leave the ego out of it and see how it makes you feel. I love that you're pointing to that. So we've got 2 minutes left. I'd love for you to leave us with some food for thought. Let us know where we can find you, either on socials or wherever we can support the work that you're doing. And then we'll be done with this chat.
Oh, is that for me or for the group?
Yeah. Oh, that's for you.
Well, I mean, I'm pretty easy to locate. You can type my name in LinkedIn and I will come up. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, you want to connect, feel free to just reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you mention that you were part of the PowerToFly, I will very likely see your note and respond quicker than otherwise. So yeah, do that. I'm looking forward to interacting with all of you offline.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And well, today is Friday, so I hope everyone has a great and safe weekend. And we'll see you next week for more Chat and Learn. So thank you again, Dami, for joining us. And thank you, everyone.